Right, let's see if this works off my phone then, considering my phone isn't the best device that we have. We tried so hard on the iPad. The iPad has basically died on us. So yeah, let's try again. Yes, my wallet's been stolen. Yes, I've had to send off for a new driving license. I've had to, send off for some new bank cards. So I've had to cancel a lot of things. Well, we are going to try with the mobile phone and see if that will suffice. Yes, England have started their tour of Sri Lanka, and they had, the weather has affected the matches in Sri Lanka, the one-day matches, and we will see how much of the Test series in Sri Lanka is affected down there. There's some really bad tropical storms hitting that part of Asia at the moment, so we'll have to see what happens long term with that. On the UFC front, both Habib and Conor McGregor are both now temporarily suspended by the Nevada State Athletic Commission. So we have to see long term what happens with that. And Thierry Henry wasn't announced as Villa manager. He's likely to be announced as Monaco's new manager within the next few days after the international break. And we have to see what happens with Aston Villa now they've got a new manager in place and how John Terry adapts to being an assistant coach. We also see we'll have to see who comes in as Brentford's new boss after the international break, considering that, that's where Villa got their manager from. We have to see long term what happens there. We have to see what goes on going forward. On the international break and this UEFA Nations League, it's only on subscription TV in the UK, so you can only watch it on Sky, and that's infuriating. Really is infuriating, but at the same time, it just shows how the common fan is not thought of in football. The Wembley sale is currently possibly on the rocks. It could possibly not actually take place now. There are concerns from the FA Council that they're not completely happy with the bid being put forward. There's a corruption allegation being put forward, and we'll find out later on in October what actually happens with the bid process and with the if it gets past this stage. They can't formally block it, but they do have a big say in if the bid can be successful or not and whether the bid can go ahead or not. There's huge concerns, and if the FA does forge ahead with the sale to Sahid Khan, it just basically is giving two fingers to the fans. And as we saw last night in the Croatia-England game, an empty stadium is really, really shit for TV. So I think anyone who is a football fan will have to bear that in mind. The fans aren't put first. We've seen the mess with the Scottish League Cup semi-finals. The fans were not put first. They were an afterthought by the organisers. Thankfully, some sense has been seen by the Scottish FA and the SPFL, but as we've seen with football in the UK, the fan is not put first. The fan is put last most of the time, and they're happy to take our money, but they're not happy to listen to our concerns. So there is that. On the ice hockey front, yes, I am going to a game this weekend, and I'll do my best to do a video on the match and a review on the match. The tech is failing us. I'm doing this live stream off my phone, so again, I apologise if the picture quality isn't great or the live stream cuts out because of whatever reason. So we'll do our best as we can. We are streaming over the internet, so it should be okay. But we'll have to see from there if the memory can hold up. But overall, it's been an interesting week for sport. The big storyline is UFC 229. That is the main storyline. It's the main thing that's going around at the moment. I think I don't know if UFC are taking this enough what actually happened and basically the previous 6-7 months. If they've taken it seriously enough and if they've made sure that they've got the discipline right. The way they've handled it, it's a little bit of a circus. It makes WWE look real in that sense. My thoughts on the whole thing, it makes UFC come out in a negative light. They're obviously, the biggest mixed martial arts promotion out there. Bellator a distant second, but it doesn't look great for a brand when this happens in a big arena like the T-Mobile Arena in Vegas, and their biggest event of all time. Doesn't look great, and is Dana White the right guy to be president of the company? Is UFC in a good place? How long can this kind of circus continue? Because we've seen it in boxing. We've seen incidents like this take place in boxing, which have stained the sport. We've seen, how boxing has got problems, and if you're not a headline fighter, you don't get paid much. So there is, in these types of sport, there are issues within them. And from what we've gathered so far, the prize purse is being withheld. Both fighters are temporarily suspended by the Nevada State Athletic Commission because they sanctioned the fight in Vegas. So in the US, each state has its own athletic commission that will sanction events like this. And because it happened on the Nevada sanctioning, they're the ones who've said no, we are suspending, these two individuals. Long term, I don't know what the future holds for UFC long term. Obviously, with what's happened over the last couple of I've dropped the stuff going wrong everywhere. Over the last few days, what the future holds for UFC long term is yet to be seen. And whether it's positive or negative, whatever happens in the outcome of what happened at UFC 229 has to be a watershed moment. They cannot afford to go back. But we'll see. It's created a lot of interest now. But UFC is now mainstream. It's mainstream. They've got big TV contracts. They've got big sponsorship contracts, and that's going to have an effect when investors come to invest in a sport. They're going to look at incidents within a sport and go, do we really want to put our money and our product in a sponsorship agreement, or invest in this whatever, insert sport here. On the football side, Thierry Henry looks likely now to be the new Monaco manager. Brentford are now looking for a new manager because obviously Dean Smith has gone to Aston Villa, and Aston Villa obviously went for the safe pair of hands. They're the experienced Championship manager who knows the ins and outs of the league. Surprise move in some quarters. It's a good move, but he's got 2 months until the transfer window opens. He's got 2 months to work with the players he's got at the club. Now, getting John Terry as assistant manager, he's been in that dressing room. He knows those players who were there from last season. Also, we'll have to see what happens to Jack Grealish, whether he will stay long term at the club or be sold on. And we have to see if Villa can get promotion this year. They need to get promotion this season. That is a must. They cannot afford not to. But this is the situation that Aston Villa find themselves in. And we'll have to see going forward what holds for Villa. But since they've sacked Steve Bruce, they've actually dropped in the table. So whether they can have a quick turnaround after the international break will be interesting. But it gives Dean Smith 2 weeks to work with the players that aren't on international duty. It gives him 2 weeks to assess the squad, the fitness of the squad, what players he wants in the squad, what players he thinks need to be dropped. Youth players. It gives him a couple of weeks to get him familiarised with his players. John Terry will help with that. I think this is a stepping stone for John Terry to go into full-time management in a couple of years. We've seen with Frank Lampard and Steven Gerrard that there is a trend now for these young ex-professional players in management. And obviously Thierry Henry looks likely to be Monaco managers. There is a trend, not just in England but in Europe, for young managers now, inexperienced managers. We've seen with Zidane, it worked at Real Madrid. First major managerial position, wins loads of trophies. Pep Guardiola, fire through Barcelona. So there is a trend now for sizable clubs to grab that young manager and throw him in. And for the most part, they've all done really, really well. So some of this fresh thinking may be what the sport needs. If we look at the Premier League, though, I mean, how long does Jose Mourinho really have? That's a question. How long does he have? Obviously, the international break will take some pressure off Mourinho and give him and the players a chance to look at themselves, those that have on international duty, and assess their and take things forward. My thoughts on Ollie Stone, I don't have any thoughts on Ollie Stone. That's my view on that. It is interesting. Obviously, we tried the live stream earlier on my iPad and it didn't really work on the iPad for whatever reason. It just wouldn't connect properly to the internet. The stream kept getting interrupted. So we're doing it off the phone, and we'll see how long the stream can last on the phone and how well the phone will hold up. So we're working with the phone at the moment. I'm just going to turn the volume up, so we'll see how it all works. But basically, I think a lot's going on in sport at the moment. Obviously, we've seen the London Broncos now get promotion back to the Super League, which I think is actually a blessing in disguise for the Rugby League Super League. If Super League is to be seen as a successful competition, as a successful league, and if Rugby League is to continue to grow in this country, and it needs cash, it needs growth, it needs to grow in the south of England. I understand why they decided to get Toronto Wolfpack in there. I understand they want to grow the game in North America, but in that sense, North America leads its own professional league. The fact that Catalan Dragons won the Challenge Cup, again, is a shot in the arm that Super League needs to take its game away from traditional areas and move them into non-traditional locations around the world and around Europe. The southeast of England is a prime location. It's where a lot of the money is, a lot of the wealth and the infrastructure is already there, and a lot of big companies are based in the southeast that be willing to sponsor. Obviously, rugby union's got a hold there. You could hold discussions with having rugby union and rugby league clubs parallel. There's various options they could look at, but they've got to expand into the south of England because rugby union's expanding really successfully in the north of England and has been for quite some time. And rugby league risks really getting left behind by its sister code. And then you've got to look at the NRL as well. You've got to look how far ahead the NRL is over the Super League in quality level, talent level, skill set, fitness, physicality. The fact it's experimenting with new rules to increase the flow of the game and improve the quality of the game. It's all pointing in the direction of Super League being left behind. And a lot of clubs are cash strapped. There's issues with finances in the game. So yeah, the London Broncos going up is a positive for the league. It's a positive for the Super League, and they have to use it correctly. They have to make sure that the promotion relegation system works, for one, which it hasn't done under the Super 8 system. It just hasn't worked. It's been unnecessarily confusing, and I don't think has fully worked for the benefit of Super League. London Broncos, they have to. The Super League has to look at London Broncos and go, right, we need to make this team as successful as possible in the Super League. And we'll have to see how London Broncos, who've now decided to go down the homegrown talent route, a lot of their players are from the southeast. Young players from London are now coming through and going to other Super League sides. So there is hope for the future that there is growth. But we need more than just the London Broncos and the London Scholars in the professional ranks of rugby league. We need more rugby league clubs in the south of England. It's the only way the Super League is going to grow, increase its talent pool, increase the participation of the sport, get more fans into the sport, get more money into the sport. It cannot stay as a Northerners only game, which is how it's seen by a lot in the sport world. It's very limited in where it's played, its fan base, and its quality base of players. Expanding in the south of England would be a really, really good move. So we'll see what happens. We'll also have to look at Toronto Wolfpack if they can get to the Super League at any point in the next couple of years. I think they will do it. I think they have to do it. The City of Toronto has bought in. There are plans to increase the size of the North American contingent of professional rugby league clubs over the next couple of years, and hopefully that has a knock-on effect of more young Canadian and American players playing the game over the next few years. There is only one Canadian playing in the Wolfpack right now. There needs to be more for it to be a real success. But ultimately, it has been a really busy week for the sport. At the same time, with all the tech issues on my end, it has been frustrating the last 3 days. The laptop's failed, wallet's been stolen, iPad failed on the live stream. So it hasn't been a great week my end. My left shoulder injury has come back. Okay. What's going to happen to you? I don't know. Stomach cramps. Preferably, go on a live stream that someone gives a fuck. I don't know. Sports live stream, mate. So bye bye. The issues within sport right now. So we'll go back to the UFC. We'll look at the UFC and we'll discuss what's happened there. The incident at the Barclays Arena, beginning of the year. If anyone else, average Joe, does that, they're going to prison. The fact that Conor McGregor got away with, a public disorder offence, paid a fine, it just shows that the UFC did possibly go to the authorities and say, look, and put pressure on the New York authorities not to go further with that. Obviously, Conor McGregor entered into a plea deal. But what happened at UFC 229 was of course, they had completely mismanaged the build-up. They had completely mismanaged the issues within between the two fighters. They allowed racial slurs to be used, religious slurs to be used, personal slurs to be used by the McGregor camp. Cultural intolerance, cultural ignorance, like offering a Muslim alcohol. I mean, that is completely culturally insensitive from Conor McGregor, and fully aware of what he was doing. And that has been allowed by Dana White and the UFC to fester for 6-8 months. And UFC's made a lot of money out of these fighters over the years. A lot of money. They made a lot of money out of that pay-per-view. So there are concerns going forwards that what does the future hold for UFC? Now, the media is slamming Khabib, but actually Conor McGregor has a big part to play in the whole situation over the last 8-10 months. Dana White, the president of UFC, has a big part to play as well. Basketball. The British Basketball League is growing, and all you got to do is go online. Is the best bet. I don't know enough about the size of the British Basketball League in this country, but your best bet is to go online. Is to look at your current location where you live, which is, I'm assuming, in the northeast, and I believe Sheffield has a team. So Sheffield is a sports mad city. It's a city with a lot of sports teams in it that are all reasonably successful at the various leagues and sports that they have. The best bet to find your local insert sport or sports team is yes is to go online and to look into it. I don't know enough about British basketball. There is issues though with the funding for British basketball, and that goes back to the 2012 Olympics and the Olympic legacy and how they withdrew funding for basketball prior to the Olympics in Rio. And there's been a big issue about Olympic funding for quite some time now for a variety of sports, and there's been a backlash against how the funding is structured for sport in this country at Olympic level, amateur level, by the UK sport and the lottery and the Olympic committee and what has come out is, because it is still a really minor sport for participation, and there have been issues in the past with professional teams folding and the lack of exposure in the mainstream media as well. There is that issue. Your best bet is to go online. Your best bet is to do a bit of research, and that's the advice I'm going to give you, because obviously I'm doing this off my phone, not my laptop. I can't now quickly go on the internet, find out the information for you and give it back, because obviously all that tech is failed. But no, your best bet is to look online, and I do believe there is a team in Sheffield, but I'm not 100% certain on that. I wouldn't wish to give you false information, but the season is now finished for the British basketball, I believe. And there is an interest there from a fan base, but the issue is most basketball fans in this country don't support their local teams. They follow the NBA. They follow the National Basketball Association of the US, where all the LeBron James and all that, they follow the NBA rather than the league here. So best bet is to go online, research, have a look, see what you can find, and go from there. Obviously, basketball is not one of my favourite sports, if I'm honest. I think it's subjective. I mean, you've got to look at what people find interesting, and I don't know if basketball has a long-term future in the UK going forward, how successful it's going to be as a professional league here. The fact that the NBA are taking games to the O2 in London says that they know there's a fan base for the NBA here. Is whether the quality level of British players getting produced is there, if there's the player base and the fan base to support locally. We have seen a couple of British-born players now play in the NBA, but the fact that it's got to compete with a lot of other sports that are more established, more professional, more funding, better TV deal, it's going to struggle. There are 4 or 5 sports well above it in the pecking order for TV deal, participation, fans, fan base, sponsorship. It's really low down on the level of things as a team sport. You've got rugby league, rugby union, football, cricket, ice hockey. They're all above it. They've all got TV deals in some shape or form. They've all got sponsorship deals, larger fan bases, more established leagues, more professional players. So it's if you're going to grow a sport, you've got to look at what you're going to be competing against as your market share. You've got to look at a variety of things. But your best bet to find your local basketball team is to go online and give it a look, and look at the season fixture list, and look at how the league is structured and a variety of things. I mean, the amount of questions I get asked about what's my local team for this sport or that sport that isn't football, and it's interesting that a lot of people don't realise they have a local cricket club, or they have a rugby league team or rugby union team or whatever it may be at whatever level. Best bet is to look at on the internet. But I think basketball long term in this country, I think the fan base is more interested in the NBA than supporting their local teams, which then also means if you're not supporting your local team, you're less likely to play for your local team as well. If you cannot see a visible presence, you're less likely to want to play. The fact that the NBA is bringing games here, though, is interesting, and we'll see how successful the NBA International Series is compared to the NFL, because look, there's no American Football League here, really, is there? So NFL Europe failed. So you can see that supporting a league that's foreign league, you've got to look at participation as well. There's a variety of things, TV deal, a multitude of issues, but we'll see what happens. We'll have to see what happens with the British Basketball League. It is there, but it's small compared to a lot of professional leagues in this country and around Europe. Basketball is more participated on in other countries in Europe, and has more funding and bigger crowds. And whether British players would rather play abroad or in Britain, it is what it is. But a good question. It's a good question. But I mean, it's not often that I get basketball-related questions. But the Boston Celtics did take a home game to the O2 in London last season. So there is clearly an interest from fans in this country for basketball. It's whether they would rather watch the NBA or start investing and supporting their own domestic league. That's the issue. But basketball has had funding issues. So again, it's got a lack of exposure in this country. It's because the sports narrative and the sports media is geared towards football, rugby union, rugby league, cricket, and to a certain extent now ice hockey as well. They're your team sports. They're the ones that have the TV deal, the press coverage, the playing base, the fan base, more established, better structures, and that's where basketball struggles. And it's just how the sports media works. If you look at the sports media in this country, and the sports stories that are done, football, rugby union, rugby league, they're the three that really dominate. Cricket's in there as well. Ice hockey does have a limited mainstream media following, but that's growing, and there is established leagues in this country. Basketball, you hardly hear of British basketball on the news. You hardly hear of it unless you look at your local websites, your local news websites. You're hardly going to hear of British basketball much. But there is a scope for growth. It's whether they can get a TV deal or even a radio deal, some kind of media deal to cover games, be it online or on the TV, and then it goes from there. It's all about whether they can get a deal in place to broadcast the game somehow. We've seen TV deals can be a double-edged sword. People can agree or disagree with them. But it's just about getting the exposure for these minor sports. And there just isn't press coverage or the willingness by the sports press to actually write articles, research, have a look at the funding, have a look at interviewing players and trying to actually get some exposure. It's also down to the media outlets as well in order to get the exposure, to have the interviews, to have the press releases, to do the documentaries. There's not enough, done in my eyes to increase the visibility of the sport to a wider fan base. Back on the football note of things, obviously we've seen Dean Smith announced as Aston Villa manager. I think that's a good move by Villa. I think now Brentford have got to find a similar manager of a similar calibre if they're to continue their drives, in the top half, top 10. If they can, maintain their good start to the season, and if they can also run for the playoffs as well, that's a really, really interesting managerial appointment, because obviously all the bookmakers were going for Thierry Henry, and he looks set to join Monaco as manager. So there's a lot of things in flux when it comes to the Championship and professional football right now. It is interesting when the international break comes along. League One and League Two, they still have to play games, and then obviously managers complain about fixture congestion. Whether adding this UEFA Nations League thing helps or doesn't help, I don't know. And there's also plans to have a third European Club Cup competition as well in the next couple of years. So we'll see what happens going forward from that. So that's going to be interesting. But there's a lot to think about when it comes to sport. It's been apart from the UFC 229 and Aston Villa sacking Steve Bruce, it's been a really slow sports week in a sense, because obviously it's the international break and this UEFA Nations League thing. It's infancy. It's just starting. I think the issue they've done is they put it on subscription TV. It's on Sky in this country. Whether that's going to help it establish and really, it's in its infancy. We don't know long term if it's going to be a permanent solution where UEFA are going to go, right, it's not working as we intended. So that's going to be really interesting to look at how the UEFA Nations League works 5-10 years from now. Obviously Croatia and England was behind closed doors. Okay, I wasn't aware that League One and League Two took a break at the end of November for a week. I just find it really interesting that the Football League, League One and League Two, don't get the international breaks off. So the Premier League and Championship actually gets more time off than League One and League Two when it comes to international breaks, because it's the second international break of the season, and that means they would have had 3 to 4 weeks off, whereas League One and League Two get 1 week. You can see where the issue with fixture congestion comes from for all leagues. Obviously, the winter break, they're going to experiment with the winter break, I think, this season as well. So that'll have an interesting, impact on things. But it is interesting that the League One and League Two only get obviously that 1 week in November. Is it the right time of year to have a mid-season break? I don't know. But they have to look at fixture congestion and how they structure the cup competitions and a variety of things, and the weather. This winter, decimated football. At the beginning of the year. It's more likely to snow in February and March than in November, December. Whether they should have the season break then, I don't know. I mean, there's also, you've got to look at the Boxing Day matches and the Christmas fixture congestion as well. They really have to, look long and hard about how the fixture list is done. I mean, the season starts in August. It's really it's interesting. Also, the La Liga plans to take this game to the US. That's met with a lot of backlash. So it seems to me that the governing bodies and the leagues are actually in a battle with their fans and players, and they risk alienating the fan base. So we'll have to see what happens with a lot of things. But I am really surprised that League One and League Two don't get the international breaks off. The structure of the Checker Trade Trophy as well, with the Premier League and Championship clubs, you'd be able to put out their reserves or your youth under 23s playing in it. I think that's wrong. So there's been a backlash against that. A variety of things. But it is interesting. I mean, I am surprised that there isn't more of a fuss kicked up by football clubs. Well, I hope you enjoy the Okay, so it's just a little bit more than a week. Okay, I am still surprised though that it takes place later in the season. The Premier League and Championship already had a couple of breaks already by that point. It does show that the richer clubs do get favourable rulings, I suppose. Whether that's fair or not, I don't know. For the health of the game, but that's really, really interesting. It is really interesting that that's how it's structured. I know the FA Cup starts at about that time as well, so maybe it's to do with the FA Cup getting games in there. I don't know. I mean, in other sports, they do seem to have, other sports and other leagues. In football, other leagues seem to have a mid-season break, winter break. But in other sports, they seem to have bye weeks where certain teams will have a week off. They've done it in the NHL now to mixed feedback. They do it in the NFL. So in North American sports they do it. In the NRL in Australia and the AFL in Australia they do it. So other leagues and other sports do it. I'm really surprised with football in this country how it's not structured where it's fair for all leagues. Okay, it all happens at the same time. It's obviously to do with the TV companies and the TV viewership and how much of a say. Enjoy the final. Honestly, enjoy the final. Wish you all the best. That again, the Super League Grand Final that should be on free-to-air TV. I don't know why, because Sky is actually slowly killing the sport. I do believe that. I think having the Super League solely on Sky Sports doesn't help Super League at all. And having limited Challenge Cup coverage from the quarterfinals onwards, I don't think helps Rugby League either. But good luck. Enjoy the final. It should be. Well, the weather might be a bit more chaotic up north. We've had heavy winds and heavy rain, and hopefully that doesn't detract too much from the spectacle on the field. And hopefully it is a good game. Hopefully the pitch holds up, because the weather has been atrocious the last 24, 48 hours in parts of the country. So hopefully the weather doesn't affect the grand final too much. But that's again something that needs to be looked at, where cup finals are hosted, because Wembley has come under a lot of criticism. The Wembley sale has been criticised. That's the other real big story is the sale of Wembley. That's rumbling on. The UFC, and there's not a lot really happening right now in sport, which is really boring. I mean, yeah, the NHL season started again, so I'm happy with having the NHL back, and already there's no teams, there's no games today. There's no day off. Or yesterday there was no games, so it's how the fixturing works. But in the NHL they do have bye weeks for individual teams, but they also have the All-Star break, so it all works out that every team, all 31 teams, get basically 2 weeks off in the season. Yeah, it's going to be but you got to look forward to the November Test matches between England and New Zealand. Australia have Test matches as well against New Zealand and Tonga. So there is International Rugby League next month, and yeah, it's just 3-4 months with no Rugby League. It is what it is. At the end of the day, we can't expect especially in a sport like Rugby League, you cannot expect the players to play for 12 months solid every year and just have the 24 days off. It's just not physically possible in professional sport. So it is what it is. There's been questions about whether the Challenge Cup could be played in the off season. I think that's wrong as well, because that then devalues the tournament. Plus the players will be exhausted. But there are issues that Rugby League needs to face. The TV rights, growing the game in the south of England, I think is vital. I think the London Broncos getting back in the Super League will help that. Dana White. Well, what I do know about the UFC, and we have finally got a working live stream. What I know about the UFC is both Khabib and Conor McGregor have been suspended by the Nevada State Athletic Commission because they sanctioned the UFC 229 event because it took place in Las Vegas, Nevada. They have temporarily suspended pending the full investigation. Dana White, I'm concerned about UFC going forward, and I'm not a fan of UFC. I'm not a fan of MMA really, for the most part. I'm a casual viewer. UFC has made a lot of money, a lot of growth in the last 17 years, from when Dana White first became president to now. The way the last, I would say, year or so by UFC's been handled by Dana White as president hasn't necessarily been great, but it's generated a lot of revenue and a lot of interest in the promotion and the sport. From what I gather, Conor McGregor was initially medically suspended, so he's on medical stand now, which is a totally 100% regular thing. It so happens that Conor McGregor was one of 13 fighters who were medically stood down after UFC 229. That includes the undercard. What's then happened since then is that both he and Khabib have both been suspended temporarily. I can see long term there could be the Nevada State Athletic Commission might take a dimmer view than UFC have on the events of UFC 229. that will be interesting. But as far as I know, there's been no further statements released by Dana White at this time. I think because UFC is closely linked with the Nevada State Athletic Commission from its previous owners, the Fertitti brothers. There is a strong connection between UFC and the Nevada State Athletic Commission dating back to 2001. I think Dana White's staying very tight-lipped. I think the PR image and the damage done to the brand is there. There are some people saying it's a conspiracy, it's all set up. And Dana White's given conflicting statements over the last year, especially with the what happened at the Barclays Center in New York, in Brooklyn, with what happened. Conor McGregor, he said, oh, he's never going to fight for UFC again, and within 6 to 8 months, guess what? He's fighting for UFC again at UFC 229. So we've seen conflicting statements from Dana White in the past. The way UFC has handled these two fighters, especially, and other instances, is not good. I think because it's now UFC is so mainstream now. They're in damage limitation mode, but we'll have to see what happens. The Nevada State Athletic Commission are investigating. When they release their full findings, we'll see if there's any suspensions, suspended fighting licenses as well, because you have to have a fight license. Will Khabib be stripped of the belt? Will they have to pay a fine? A variety of things. I think Dana White will be keeping himself quite close-lipped to avoid any more conflicting statements. On Zlatan Ibrahimovic wanting to come back, play for Malmo, and playing again in Sweden. Obviously, he signed this big deal with LA Galaxy. He's had a very big impact for LA Galaxy since he joined the club. He's scored some pretty amazing goals, admittedly in the MLS, but the skill level he's got, I think, didn't work out finally as well as he wanted at Man United. But he's not the first ex-United player to end up at LA Galaxy. He's not the first ex-Premier League player to end up at LA Galaxy. There's been quite a few who've gone that route. It'll be interesting to see if he does go back to Malmo in some capacity. But it's Zlatan, it's Ibrahimovic. He's one of the biggest egos in football. I don't know what happens long term with Zlatan Ibrahimovic. It'll be interesting if he does decide to go back to where he started things. We'll have to see what happens with Zlatan. It all depends on his knees. If he has another serious knee injury, then he's done. But I wouldn't be surprised if he gets involved as an ambassador for one of his former clubs, possibly Ajax or maybe Malmo or one of his former clubs. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being a UEFA or FIFA or UN Goodwill Ambassador. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets like an honorary presidency. It will be interesting to see what, obviously, Zlatan does. On the UFC thing, it's been badly handled. This is not the first time that a fighter has jumped out of or jumped into the octagon at an MMA fight. You could look at Conor McGregor doing that at Bellator a couple of years ago, where one of his friends was involved in a MMA bout. UFC were exceptionally lucky that there wasn't a riot, and because the way that the hype had been built up beforehand, the anti-Russian sentiment in the US, the fact that it's gone against the narrative that the mainstream media wants the Russians shouldn't win. And now that Khabib's actually met Vladimir Putin as well, there is that kind of, he's got links to the Russian state. The way that UFC have been trying to basically force it that they wanted Conor McGregor to win, basically. The anti-Russian feeling in redneck America, as I call it, is at fever pitch. There were Khabib fans in there. That could have ended in a real nasty riot, and then that UFC in real trouble. Then I think the UFC, what's going on with the UFC right now, I think yes, it's grown rapidly since 2001, since Dana White became president. And the Fertitti brothers originally bought UFC in 2001. Bearing in mind, one of the Fertitti brothers used to work for the Nevada State Athletic Commission, hence the link between the NSAC and UFC. There is a stench of dodgy dealings going on here. The conflicting statements from Dana White, I don't know how long he can stay as UFC president. Obviously, UFC's now become mainstream. It's got TV deals, it's got media partners, it's got sponsorship deals with things like Reebok and Powerade and things like that. it has to be careful how it handles the whole situation now. The Device Athletic Commission is not really impartial then. It has a long-standing relationship with the UFC. UFC is based in Vegas. That's where its headquarters are. So there is a possible lack of impartiality. But the whole thing, really bad image. We've seen it in boxing. Boxing's got an image problem. UFC risks going down the same route. And in fact, MMA risks going down the same route, because I can see some of the fighters who are currently with UFC man going to Bellator, and that's what UFC doesn't want. They want to be the ultimate promotion when it comes to mixed martial arts, and Bellator is a distant second. But I wouldn't be surprised if Bellator, some of the UFC fighters like Michael Chiesa, for example, who obviously suffered injuries in that bus attack, we don't want to work with Dana White and this organisation anymore. We want to go to the other one. We've seen MMA fighters who could have been signed by UFC go to Bellator recently. There is a link with wrestling as well. There is a link with Brock Lesnar and Bobby Lashley and others between the two. Bobby Lashley's fought for both UFC and Bellator. Brock Lesnar's fought for UFC. There is a link between Vince McMahon and Dana White. And there are links with politicians as well. There's a lot going on. I do fear for the long-term stability and future of UFC. If incidents like this become more commonplace, which I fear they could, then the brand is CM Punk. Yeah, I mean there's a few other wrestlers as well. Ronda Rousey. So there is a concern long-term for me that with the drive to get the casual fan in, look what it's done to WWE. It's actually made it worse. The drive to get casual fans in can actually damage a sport. You want to keep your hardcore fans happy, and if you get a positive vibe from your hardcore, then the new fans come in if they see that the positive vibe is there from using social media, and there's a balancing act. And I don't think UFC have done it right. I think they've expanded very, very quickly, done very, very well until 2016, and it's going off the rails slightly. But we have to see what happens long term. My Twitter handle is exactly the same as the channel name. Just type that in on Twitter, you will find me. The Sports Buffin 89. You will find me on Twitter. That's how some of my subscribers have found me on Twitter. No, you will find me on Twitter. It's exactly the same as the channel name. But no, the UFC thing. I mean, I could talk solely about UFC on this live stream. I did have UFC 2 on Xbox One on EA Sports. And yeah, Conor McGregor was on the cover for that. So because of people like Ronda Rousey and Conor McGregor, and especially Conor McGregor in some of his maverick antics, that has given exposure to UFC. The way they've handled him, badly. The way he's been advised, badly. The way he's acted, stupidly. I think we'll see what happens. Now, very interesting on this Newcastle United question, because I did my Premier League predictions of where I think teams will finish. I do put Newcastle in the relegation places. You cannot blow a 2-0 lead against a struggling Man United side and lose 3-2 and expect to stay up. You just can't do that. You can't blow a 2-0 lead in the Premier League and expect to do that regularly and long term stay up. I think Huddersfield have got a bit more fight about them than Newcastle and Cardiff, I think, and Fulham. I think Fulham have got issues off the field with Sahih Khan. There's been corruption allegations aimed at Sahih Khan at Fulham. So that'll be interesting. What happens going forward with Fulham and the Wembley deal and what's going on there. We have to see. The Premier League is very interesting at the moment. Hello. Okay, a lot of questions came in really, really quickly there. So, and I'm on my phone, so the chat comes through differently. So I'm gonna. Okay, Barnsley are beating Luton 3-2. The whole way that the boxing is more than just Goal King Canelo. There is other issues there. One of the fighters was abusing steroids. Came up with the contaminated meat excuse, which a lot of Mexican athletes have been using, who've been caught with controlled substances in their system. There's a contaminated meat scandal. Suddenly, it's only all of a sudden Mexican athletes all get, oh no, I've eaten dodgy steak, dodgy steak or dodgy pork slice. No, there's clearly an organised doping structure within the Mexican sporting world. Obviously, Mexico's got a drug war going on right now with the cartels as well. So um, that was a shambles. Boxing has issues with its anti-doping policy. Same with MMA. There are issues if you're not in training. So if you come off a fight and let's say you're like Conor McGregor right now, you're on injury stand down. You don't get tested because you're not in training because you're not fit enough or you're suspended from training for discipline issues. You don't get tested, so you can dope. Oh yeah, you can dope. Um, there is issues within boxing. There's issues. I've gone off boxing completely. I've gone off. I don't pay for these pay per views. If ITV are now making you pay for pay per views, you can sod off. Channel 5 occasionally have boxing on free to air, but they get really lesser known fighters or fighters earlier on in their pro careers. You might have had really good amateur careers like Chris Eubank Jr. But they don't really have enough um, uh, enough free to air. It's all pay per view, pay per view, pay per view, and you know that subscription pay per view sport kind of structure is off because if everyone went to the pub, it's only a few pubs and nightclubs would have it. So the subscription pay per view. When Anthony Joshua was fighting one of his fights, and Eubank, and you had the McGregor fight, everyone was down the pub. Everyone was down the friggin' pub. And I was like, well, no one's at home watching this. They're all down the boozer. So you can have like 400 people in a pub, or 100 people at the pub, and they paid for that pay per view. It makes no sense. But yeah, no, the excuses by some of these athletes when they get caught doping is really, really cringe. It's just admit to it. Just admit to it because it's just making a mockery. There's issues with WADA anyway. There's issues with links between WADA and IOC. So WADA is the World Anti-Doping Agency. The IOC is the Olympic Committee. Okay, let's just go through it. I do not have WWE Network. I really don't follow pro wrestling anymore. The Game Center and Game Pass blackouts. Now, I have heard of this. I think I have heard of obviously I'm an NHL fan. I have heard of this issue. It's not a new thing. Some fans find it highly frustrating. I don't understand. I don't understand why they do it, but at the same time, there is like an economic way of doing it. There's something that makes economic sense to have that kind of thing, but it's exceptionally frustrating for fans of said sport if you can't get watch the game you want. This is why I don't like subscription feeds and subscription sports. Now I'm just going to quickly check the comments. There's a couple of comments are coming quite quickly. Let's have a look at this. Yeah, Mike Ashley. Obviously, last year there was the proposed sale of Newcastle to what's the name? I've forgotten the name now. I'm Amanda Stabley, and I followed that from day one, and I'm really surprised that there's been no further news on he proposed what happened. I think he's put the club up for sale several times. He's had it valued several times. It's gone from the second richest club in I did a video on his running of Newcastle United since he bought the club. It's been very maverick. There's been a couple of relegations in there. I fear they could get relegated again. I don't think Rafa Benitez is going to stay there long term, even though he's a very good manager. On the Channel 4 getting the rights to the Heineken Cup, Channel 5 have got limited rights to certain domestic games of the Anglo-Irish, Anglo-Welsh Cup in this country, and the occasional Premiership game. It's got the highlights package. Rugby has to be careful as well. Clearly BT Sport isn't working because BT Sport had a monopoly in all this, so BT Sport's losing a lot of its deals. If BT Sport goes under, there could be a knock-on effect. Now, whether that means more free-to-air, which we are positive, it will have a knock-on effect on a lot of sports that have become reliant, especially in Scottish football, sports rely on BT Sport. The NHL subscription package, I'm over in the UK, so I can't comment much on Game Centre, but I do follow a guy called The Hockey Guy, and he's also made comments on some of his videos about the NHL blackout Because he's now a full-time YouTuber, I'm not a full-time YouTuber. I do have I'm a contract worker when I actually am in work, so I can't devote everything full-time to the channel that I would like. That has come up a lot with the NHL Game Centre and blackouts, and there is an economic argument behind it. I agree with it, but because I'm over here in the UK, obviously I'm not in Canada or the US. We do have access to NHL apps but the coverage of the NHL over in the UK is lesser, so I have to go on other websites. I have to go on streaming websites and hosting websites to find games. And admittedly, the game might be 6 hours late. I might have to stream it, and that might be a bad VPN. The NHL could do better to increase its coverage in the UK and in Europe. We do have a channel called Free Sports, which has been launched in the UK in the last year or so, and they do show NHL games, but they're not always the top build games of the night. They're normally between teams that don't look like to get in the playoffs. The bottom feeders like your Buffaloes, Detroit have been poor the last couple of years. Phoenix, or Arizona, sorry. So they're not necessarily the highest quality NHL games, but they do. There's the odd NHL game on British TV on the subscription and free to wear. But I have had a lot of complaints from fans about the blackout and the subscription kind of thing. There is an economic reason behind it, but if the NHL wants to grow its fan base, like with Vegas being so successful last year, they need to sort out that centre ice package because it's an absolute shambles, and it's the same with Major League Baseball and NFL, NBA as well. They also have problems. BT Sport's losing the rights to a lot of competitions. They had all the rugby sewn up for the European rugby. Spike and Dave, yep, they've done that. They have had the David Hay and links to his promotions. But if you look at subscription sport, the trend is changing. Premier Sports realised we're not getting into every household because we're tied to Sky. They launched Free Sports. They went sod Sky. We're gonna not rely on you anymore. We're gonna launch our second channel, so every household has the ability to possibly get in there. Sky is going through flux. They've just been bought. BT are going down the toilet. They're losing so many TV deals. It was meant to be free for all BT customers. It wasn't. They upped the price of the BT package to cover the fact that BT Sport wasn't making money. The guy in BT who came up with the idea of BT Sports has now been fired and has been given a massive payoff. The quality of their presenting is shocking. On YouTube they do stream the Champions League and Europa League finals. The quality of their presenting team is... Jake Humphrey is useless. Thankfully, the BBC fired him. They didn't renew his contract basically. They weren't going to pay the wages he was demanding. He's gone to Sky. Oh no, BT, sorry. They can keep him. He is killing BT Sport. Their rugby coverage is poor. I will admit the commentators can't pronounce names correctly. They're trying to be too chummy. They're not being objective. I'm kind of glad that if Channel 4 does get these rights, it's going to be good. I do think though that subscription TV is dying. People just don't want it anymore. Young people don't want it anymore. No, you can. I wouldn't pay 17 quid for that. That's nearly the equivalent of a monthly bill. Oh no, I have been bought by Comcast, which is now an American broadcaster, but Comcast does have free-to-air channels. I would be highly surprised if they don't change the structure of Sky Sports long term, because they're losing subscribers as well. People are switching off subscription sport. They're not willing to do it anymore. Over half the households in the UK don't have Sky Sports or BT Sport, and that also means Premier Sport. And Premier Sport realised this. We'll give you a free sports channel. Premier Sport realised very, very quickly that their growth was being stunted because they were subscription only. They brought out a free channel, and they did into as many homes as possible. You have to have a full HD TV or full HD box. So I don't get it, unfortunately, at the moment. But they realised very, very quickly, within Premier Sports is new compared to Sky. They realised very quickly we're not getting enough customers. We need to grow our customer base. We'll give them free sports. Bang. They worked out that Sky and BT. They looked at Sky and BT losing all these subscribers and losing all these. we'll get into the people who don't want to pay for your crap. Straight in. The quality isn't great at the moment, it's growing, but they've got a new deal with the Elite League Ice Hockey, so they've already got a British League, a British League on a TV deal for a couple of years and see how it goes. Positive start. They haven't decided to choose a game every weekend, they're choosing a couple of games every couple of weeks. They're not oversaturating, they're going slow and steady, but that's a move in the right direction. I can see more and more of these kind of channels popping up. I can see Channel 5 and Channel 4 possibly having putting on sport channels, or having again more rights to free-to-air sport. They've shown the American football on both BBC and Channel 4 when it goes to Wembley. So we'll have to see what happens long term. My thoughts on Oldham. Well, I can actually remember Oldham being in the Premier League back in the day when the Premier League was founded, when I was a wee nipper. Oldham have obviously fallen on very hard times. And I'm going to be honest, Oldham have fallen on very, very hard times. They have fallen from the top flight to the bottom professional league. I don't see them going out of the Football League, but I can see their long-term future being difficult because money, and the stadium being, well, a mess. Not gonna lie. It is a shame to see an ex-Premier League club, and people forget that Oldham Athletic were in the Premier League in the early 90s, on such a low ebb. It's a shame that they're not the only club to have been in the Premier League that is now struggling in League One, League Two. But it is an absolute shame that they are where they are. It's happened with several other clubs that have been in the Premier League. Swindon Town fallen as far as that. Bradford City. We've seen it with Leeds getting as far as low as League One. Blackburn as low as League One. This is the problem with football, and it's interesting that people are asking me opinions of their team, or you know, what could be done to improve the stability of the sport in this country. And fans are always put last. It's gone too corporate now. It's money, money, money. There has to be a balance between, obviously football's a business, but a balance between obviously making money for the club and also respecting the fan base, because the fan base are your customers. But the way Oldham have fallen, they've fallen on hard times. The issue with Oldham is where they're located as well. You've got to look at the more bigger, successful clubs in that part of the northwest. They're in a battle to attract the casual fan, to Oldham. Yes, there's a hardcore of Oldham fans, but you've got to look at it. You're in Great Manchester. You're in the northwest. Look how many professional football clubs there are in a very confined area of the country. It's going to be hard to get that casual fan, especially if the team are struggling on the field, especially if the team is in the league they're in. It would be nice to see Oldham going back up again, but they need a stadium. They need to sort out the stadium issue. They need to sort out the finances, and it is difficult. You've got Man City, Man United, Bolton. You've got obviously Liverpool and Everton down in Liverpool. You've got Blackburn and Burnley and Preston in Lancashire. You've got Accrington Stanley as well, who've obviously started big, gain momentum, have gone up to League One. So there is quite a lot of. You've got Bury. There is a lot going on around Oldham. A lot of clubs. So there are a lot of clubs around in comparable leagues above, leagues below, but they are in a very congested market in the northwest. The northwest is a very congested sports market, and that's one of the things that you've got to make yourself different. Ticket price, success. They haven't got the success. The stadium isn't really there. They're leeching fans. There's only the hardcore left now. Most young kids want to be City fans, Man United fans. They don't want to be Oldham fans. It's not a fashionable club to support, and it is a shame that they were in the Premier League. And this is where the Premier League needs, and the Football League and the FA needs to look at supporting clubs a lot better. Oh yeah, you know, Luton Town went out of the Football League for a while. Oxford United have gone out of the Football League as well. Come back in, yeah, they've come back in, but Chester City business has been reformed. Boston United, Barnet. There's a lot of clubs. There are a lot of clubs with financial problems off the field and structural problems off the field. So there are issues there. I'm not gonna lie. Oldham do have problems though. Gretna, yes, Gretna are the ultimate high and low. Although you can say teams like Livingston, Rangers, that you know, Dunfermline, Dundee United. You know, you could list off Hibs, Hearts. There's a lot of clubs in Scottish football in the top two tiers that have also nearly gone a Gretna. And I say that with a tongue in cheek, nearly gone a Gretna. Oh yeah, no. They also said you couldn't play in their home stadium because it didn't quite meet uh, um, didn't meet SPFL standards for a Premier League side ground, so they had to share at Motherwell of all places, which was miles away. So the Scottish Premier League made sure they failed. They didn't want the little guy, the underdog, to win. Yes, that comes down to the structural integrity of the Scottish Football League. How Tavares. I'll go for Tavares. Looking at how it's spelt, Elias Elias Pettersson, I think, would how you Elias Pettersson. Um, I think, but you know, because well, Tavares is Canadian. He's Canadian born. Yes, he's obviously of Italian descent, Italian Spanish descent, I believe. Is Tavares. Um, the Pettersson or Pettersson, because of Scandinavian, there's you've got Danish, Scandinavian, you've got Norwegian, Swedish, Icelandic. They have different ways of pronouncing a similar looking surname. You've got Peterson, Pettersson. Uh, I would go for Elias Pettersson. I honestly don't. I honestly couldn't tell you because it depends. You know, I know he's Swedish, but if he was from Denmark, it'd be pronounced differently. If he's from Norway, it'd be pronounced differently. Iceland, even if he was from Finland, it would all be pronounced differently. So we'd have to go with the Swedish pronunciation and how when he's having a Swedish interview, how they would pronounce his name. Um, um, oh no, it Tavares. If he was back in Italy, you would have to be. I can't pronounce names. Nurmagomedov. Nurmagomedov. But no, in with Tavares or Tavares, because you could say it's a Spanish sounding surname, maybe a bit of French, maybe a bit of Italian. I know he's of Italian ancestry, but that part of the Mediterranean, mixed ancestry is the thing. He could be Sicilian, I think, and that's a very mixed bag. Regional pronunciation would be different. If he was from Spain, it might be EZ, Tavares. France, it'd be Tavares. Possibly if it's from Catalonia. From Italy, it's Tavares. There is no correct way to pronounce the surname. It's all down to regional dialect. So my surname Curran can be pronounced differently. Smith can be pronounced Smythe, or spelt that way. I think you have to listen how John Tavares, wants his name to be pronounced. Or if he was to be interviewed by an Italian, they might pronounce it differently. If he was interviewed by a Spaniard, he might pronounce it differently. It's a Mediterranean name. It is Italian based with a hint of Spanish and French in there. But it's John Tavares. Really, it's an Italian-Spanish name. There is no correct way of pronouncing it, I don't think. I just like it when commentators can't pronounce Kachuk. Tachuk, it's Kachuk. Like how they can't get that right, or they can't. Is it Roy? Is it Wa? There is different ways of pronouncing things. It's funny though how it's become like a big talking point. He's still playing really, really well, and he's settling into his new team really well. He's already had a hat trick. I think the name pronunciation is the least of the Leafs' worries. I think their bigger worry is defence and goaltending. They're leaking a lot of goals. Yes, they're scoring a lot, but they're leaking a lot. And this isn't the 1980s Oilers. This is a Leafs side that hasn't won Stanley Cups. It's Nurmagomedov. I think that's how you Nurmagomedov. I think is how you pronounce his surname. He's from Dagestan. It's an Islamic surname with Russian twist in it. It's been Russified. But Habib is Habib. I think I'm not watching Germany, not Holland. I don't have because it's on pay-per-view TV and I refuse to pay to view national sport. I think that should be free to wear. Nylander, Nylander. I do think they will need him long term. I do think that Willie Nylander is more important than the Leafs realise. I think they risk losing him as a free agent to a rival, and there are other good teams, not only in Canada, but in their division, in their conference, on the other conference. It doesn't matter, they cannot, if they want to be taken as a serious win now, they want to win now, obviously. They've been building to this point for about 3-4 years. They want to win now. Willie Nylander will be crucial at some point this season. I have no doubt on that. The issue is the salary cap, and people are just saying, "Oh, wouldn't wouldn't the NHL be better without the salary cap?" Well, the same teams have been winning the Stanley Cup even with the salary cap. Without the salary cap, it. I mean, Nylander's an interesting one. It's been going on for a while now. But hey, we'll see what happens. I think the issue with the Maple Leafs is their defence. And yeah, Braden Point as well. There are a few UFAs and RFAs that their contracts are up at the end of this year. I'm still not 100%, restricted non-restricted free agent. I call them free agency, really. There are obviously differences between the two. It's the salary cap. If you don't have the salary cap, these things are already negotiated. The Maple Leafs actually can afford to pay Willie Nylander what he wants, but there's a salary cap, and they're obviously looking long term with Austin Matthews and Marner and looking long term and trying to keep that core together because they've got Tavares on a big deal, and that is what this team, the Jets, are going to suffer with long term is keeping their core together, and it's going to be the same across the board for every team when they have a good season and players really step up, keeping those teams together because on salary cap. That's why teams like Arizona get all these cap dumps for really, really crappy contracts. They're cap dumps. I know Conor McGregor admitted he wouldn't press charges. There were 3 members of Habib's coaching team arrested. McGregor came out and said, "I'm not pressing charges." I don't honestly know what UFC are playing at. They do risk the long-term damage to the company and the brand being there, and it's a blood sport. And since 2001, there's been a lot of MMA and UFC fighters that have appeared as cameo roles in movies. There's been films about mixed martial arts done more. Well, they're pretty crappy B movies, but they have been done. They've obviously got video game deals, TV deals. So the growth in UFC up to 2016 was big. The growth in MMA was big. That's why Bellator is a multi-million-dollar company as well. It's just a lot smaller. But Dana White is treading a fine line, and UFC are treading a fine line between trying to get interest in the brand and make money, and risking full-blown riots, because that could have escalated into a riot inside T-Mobile Arena in Vegas. That could have really blown up real quick, and then that's when you have damage control. They're in damage limitation mode at the moment, and I don't know. And I don't know how long UFC can keep up this way of doing things. Well, Dana White actually doesn't own UFC. He's just the president. He doesn't own it. I did a video on Dana White and the UFC. Dana White was born in Connecticut. He got into boxing. He finished high school in Maine. He graduated in 1987 at the age of 18. He did not go to university. He ended up taking up boxing. He ended up obviously being a sparring partner for some mixed martial artists in the late 80s, early 90s. UFC gets set up. He ends up working for the UFC. He gets to know the owners and some of the fighters in UFC. The then owner, whose name I forget, put it up for 2001. Dana White obviously made friends with the Fertitti brothers, one of whom worked for the Nevada State Commission. He said, look, the company's up for sale. I have a plan to make the company more mainstream and to grow mixed martial arts. I need you guys on side to sanction, become the sanctioning governing body. We want to take this as a mainstream now, really mainstream, make some big money, which is a good idea. The Fertitti brothers bought it in 2001. They sold it on in 2016. In 2001, he was made president of UFC. He remained president after 2016 because he'd obviously overseen this massive growth. Very similar to Gary Bettman in NHL. Massive growth in the promotion. Overtook Bellator. Makes Bellator look very second best. But a lot of people don't know about Bellator being an MMA promotion because of UFC. Everyone thinks UFC actually is the name of the sport, not the promotion. It's mixed martial arts, allegedly. 2016 comes along. Conor McGregor has his last fight in UFC up until last weekend. He then goes on to fight Floyd Mayweather. Dana White has now come out and says he wants to bring boxing under the UFC, stable and be a boxing promoter as well, and promote boxing fights. That will be interesting if that gets given the sanctioning go ahead from other boxing governing bodies and saying, yeah, we're happy to have another belt on the line for the various weight divisions internationally. But no, it's owned by I think a company called WME-ING, which is basically a holding company for a variety of investors who bought into UFC, and it was sold for $4 billion in 2016. But Dana White is just president. He does have shares within UFC. I think about 9% of the company is his. He made a lot of money out of the sale. He was kept as president. He's made a lot of money out of UFC. He's a multi-millionaire. Whether he is the right guy to, run UFC, he's not the owner, but he's the guy who's the president. He makes a lot of the decisions. He makes, he's the public face of the company. Whether he's the right guy to be president long term, we shall see. But he doesn't own UFC. He's just part of the running management side of it. His rise to the top of UFC was very, very, very quick though. From sparring partner to working as an assistant to then basically becoming president of UFC. But no, he does make Gary Bettman and the NHL look professional. He does make the NFL commissioner look like he's not a racist. It is a circus. And talking about the NHL and Gary Bettman, there are issues with within the NHL. There are issues, and the NFL, and Major League Baseball, and the NBA. All these major league sports in the US and Canada do have problems. They're not perfect, but UFC is making them look perfect. And Gary Bettman does have his detractors, but people need to remember this: Gary Bettman is the spokesman for the owners. Just because he's commissioner, he doesn't actually have as much power as people think. I do think that when Seattle join the league in a year or two's time, that'll be the last expansion the NHL has. It will stay at 32. It will not get any bigger. He will say we're not ruling it out, but there comes a point when the league gets too big and we'll have to be split into a two-tier league then, and owners won't want that. And we'll see what happens long term with we'll see what happens long term with the NHL. We'll see what happens long term with UFC. Talking about computer games, okay. I didn't buy Black Ops 4. Not really bought into it. Not really interested. But I did buy this. I bought Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and in, I would say, 2 weeks' time, I am gonna get Red Dead Redemption 2. Um, I think I've gone off Call of Duty a little bit. I might get Black Ops 4 after Christmas when it's cheaper in price. I know the hype would have died down by then, but I'm not overly sold on Call of Duty anymore. I think they went wrong after Advanced Warfare, and Advanced Warfare was a bit, you know, wasn't the best. Online's pretty good. World War Two, I sold it. I traded it in. I just didn't enjoy the online experience. I loved the storyline. Online, didn't enjoy it. And that's what sells or breaks the game for me now is the storyline's got to be good. A lot of people don't play the storyline Call of Duty. I'm one of those guys who does play the storyline first. I kind of like a storyline and a game like that. But if the online, if I can't get to grips with it, Infinite Warfare was infinite shite. Black Ops 3, I didn't like. World War 2, I didn't mind the storyline. The online was passable, but they made so many changes to it to keep it simple. Simple works best. If you can't keep it simple, don't try. I had Call of Duty Ghosts, wasn't sold on that either. I did a bit of online on that on my cousin's account, and yeah, wasn't really sold on it either. It wasn't. I think they've done it with Call of Duty title now. They do one every year. It's not as exciting. It's not the same. I think World War Two they gave it good attempts, but they got mixed reviews. I think, and there were so many issues with the online as well that I think I think they're overdoing it with Call of Duty a little bit. But I'm definitely gonna be getting Red Dead Redemption 2, and I will be doing a little review on the other channel when the laptop is fixed next week, because I've got to wait till next week before I can fix the laptop now. Oh no, I haven't kept up to date on Assassin's Creed since Assassin's Creed 2. I didn't buy any of the recent ones, but I had to get that because I like that period in history. I like the way that Assassin's Creed does look at periods in history and get involved with that. I'm about halfway through the game already. I will say this, it's more challenging than I thought, and I put it on the easy mode because I just like the storyline and not being overly taxed. I'm finding this really hard. It is a really testing game. It's really challenging. Some people have said the map is a little bit on the big side. I don't think it's actually that bad. I think the way they've done the free world roam is pretty cool. You can go anywhere and take up missions, side quests, and off the main storyline, which keep it. If you're not quite ranked up for the main storyline missions, you can definitely have fun exploring the map and doing side quests and exploring hidden locations to gain experience, which I found kind of cool. They've got a lot of historical sites that they've actually honestly researched really well, and made sure that they've got that historical temple, that historical fortress, they've got that historical palace. They've made sure they've done their research on the history of the classical Greek world. They haven't got every single island because there's about 3,000 Greek islands or something silly like that, something that's no bigger than a rock. But they have really even got some of the legendary islands from myth and legend in there as well, which is really kind of cool to see. And I'll be going on that in a bit. And I've done a review on it the day after I bought it. I said it was challenging, it was a bit daunting. Now that I've got into it now and I'm more used to it, I'm really, really enjoying it. I wouldn't dread the Red Dead Redemption 2. You've got 7 playable characters. What we saw with GTA 4 till now on Rockstar is you had GTA 4, you had the 2 expansion packs where they tinker with the gameplay slightly, and then you had LA Noire and Red Dead Original in there as well. And again, different tinkering. On Red Dead they brought in some of the slow-mo shooting and abilities when you're working, which they brought into GTA 5, where you had 3 playable characters, and now we're seeing a growth from that 3 playable characters to 7 characters and multiple story arcs. So they basically, from GTA 4 till now, on all Rockstar titles, including Max Payne 3, they've been evolving the gameplay when it comes to third person and first person shooters. I believe there will be a first person shooter mode, which they did bring in on GTA 5 on Xbox One, which is not on the 360, which is not necessarily great, but they are willing to experiment with that. So we are seeing that. I think you've got to look at the amount of Rockstar Studios that were involved in the development of Red Dead Redemption 2. All of them, every single Rockstar studio has been involved in the development of this game, from start to finish. So they basically basically bet the house on this game. They have bet the farm. Is a poker term. They've really put all their eggs in one basket. It will sell. It won't be the best game ever, but it will sell. Looking at the trailers for it, it's looking good. I'm not gonna lie, it is looking pretty tasty. I'm gonna buy it. I will do a review on it on the other channel and maybe this channel. And we're definitely gonna give it a go. But I've got a couple more weeks of Assassin's Creed, and I seriously want to get Master Prestige, the ultimate Master Prestige level on this, because I'm ranked quite highly on Advanced Warfare Call of Duty on online. I want to get the top Master Prestige level, and then I know I've achieved something then, because I've been chipping away slowly for about 3 years now on this game. I haven't, no, but if you want to get Black Ops 4, feel free to get it. I wouldn't be put off. I just think they've oversaturated the market with the Call of Duties and the Battlefields as well, though, because they're now EA Games, Battlefield, Activision, Call of Duty. They're really in a battle for that historical player shooter kind of game. They are really going for it both at the same time. I might get Black Ops 4 and give it a whirl, but I wouldn't necessarily say I'm sold on it. I didn't enjoy Black Ops 2 or 3. Fortnite's a free game with add-ons. That's why it's been so mad. But I'm not sold on Fortnite. I don't see the point of Fortnite. I'm not a fan of Fortnite. It can go away. That's my personal view on it. I'm not knocking people who play it, but it's not my type of thing. There's no real structure. It's just run out and kill people, really, which is a bit dull. But no, I like the way we've gone from sports chat to gaming chat, and I haven't set up live streaming for the second channel yet, because on the second channel, on the YouTube studio, I'm now, for some reason, they're forcing me to use the beta rather than YouTube Studio Classic, and I don't like the beta at all. I really dislike it. The analytics are all wrong. It's harder to use. But from next year, all YouTubers will be forced to use a new YouTube Studio beta rather than Studio Classic, which I think is stupid and short-sighted. YouTube really don't give a toss what we think. But no, yeah, it's been a bit of an awkward couple of days. Lost my job. Well, my contract, it ended badly where I was. I've had my wallet stolen, so I've had to order a new driving license, and I've had to order and wait for my new bank card to turn up. So I'm on limited funds for the next week. So yeah, I've had to cancel a lot of things. It's really it's anal. Yeah, Leeds. I think Leeds Rhinos. They've had a difficult couple of years now. And what I was saying earlier on, when the live stream was struggling on the iPad, we tried using the iPad for live stream. It did not work. It did not want to work. It didn't like it. Leeds lost a lot of experience. Their experienced leadership core basically all retired within a couple of years of each other. They've either left the club, like Maguire, or retired, like Burrows and Peacock. They all finished at the same time within a very short spell of each other. And it's how it's going to take a while. I don't think Leeds will be as successful as they have been over the last decade or so. It's going to take a bit longer to get back up to where Leeds were. But because Leeds fans got so used to winning, they've got to get used to losing as well. And that's the mark of a strong club, is if the fans are loyal through thick and thin. If they're just there for the good times, not for the bad, then there is an issue with the culture within a club. As a Blackburn fan, I can tell you fans are staying away. Our average gate is half of what it should be. And that says something about the Glory supporters. I don't like those fair weather fans, as I call them, who just turn up and support when the team are doing well. But yeah, no, the wallet, yes. I believe I dropped it in a shop. I went back to the shop to say, look, where's my wallet? I believe I dropped it here. I went, no, you haven't. And then their story didn't match up to what I did. I took it out of my pocket. They claim I took it out of my bag. Didn't take out my bag. I had it in my wallet. I had it in my pocket. Because I went into a tech shop to buy an SD card for my phone. And I think they've stolen it. Where I've dropped it, they've taken it. Yeah. So I've had to cancel my card. I've had to apply for a replacement driving license, which has cost me 20 quid, which my relative, yeah, it's just, yeah. So yeah, right, let's have a look at that. Let's have a look at this. Well, a message just came in on a hockey related thing. Yeah, the Blackhawks, they bought the biggest arena in the NHL, but they are still keeping the fans in though. I think yes, they've had 3 Stanley Cups in 10 years, um, but there was a gap between their first Stanley Cup they had in this recent run and their second and third, and fans were still coming in. But for many years, the team was shocking. But they are an original six franchise. It's like Detroit. Detroit have bandwagon fans because they left the Joe and they're now at the Little Caesars, and they've had to change the colour of the seats because they worked out red seats look really crap on TV when they're empty, so they made them black seats, and which makes it the Little Caesars look really dark and foreboding and not very positive. So I don't know what they've done there. But let's have a look at. So what's okay? So there's an issue with the Swindon game tonight. That's not necessarily a good thing. We've seen ice failures happen, and they can have a long term effect on a team when it comes to ice hockey. I think there is an issue that can have a long term effect if the team can train. Yeah, they had 2 good wins last weekend against Invicta, but Invicta aren't really a strong team. I'm not going to lie. Hammered them. But it is worrying that the ice surface has got an issue. And hopefully that is resolved, because that can have a knock-on effect for other teams. We've seen, obviously, with Basingstoke State, they're struggling. But it means we're going to be fired up, because we're going to have our game eye in. That means, our players are going to be maybe a bit bashed up, because the game last week against Milton Keynes was a fiercely fought affair, I would say. Physically, we just strangled them offensively, and they didn't really have a much up front. But I can see that possibly being a negative for Swindon tomorrow night when it comes to the game. I can see that having a negative effect because they haven't been able to get that extra, pre-match warm-up in, that extra bit of training in, because the ice surface isn't up to scratch. That will have an effect. If you can do as much, gym work and off-ice work as possible through tactics or warm-up runs and gym work, but if you're not on the ice putting those tactics into practice and those things you've learned and getting those combinations right, yeah, that kind of an effect. So we'll see what happens tomorrow, and hopefully it's only a temporary issue. But there we go. Leeds Wales women, yeah, that's good. It's always good to have a women's side of the game. But no, talking about Billy Joe Saunders, he's come out and he's come out and he's obviously had that offensive tweet video thing where he offered a woman sex to beat someone up or something. Billy Joe Saunders, I think he should be done. He should. I mean, I have my views on Billy Joe Saunders. I don't think he should be allowed to box. I think he should have his license revoked. And he's failed a mandatory drugs test. He's done. It's a disgrace. Boxing is a disgrace of a sport, because he's failed his mandatory drugs test because he's entering into a bout. Throughout the year, he will get tested possibly once, because he's not training all year. Boxers aren't training all year. They're only training part of the year. So Billy Joe Saunders is a joke. He's a disgrace. It's not acceptable. For a sport that's got a lot of PR issues in boxing, that is another PR nightmare for the promoters, his management team, the sport itself, because there's so many different governing bodies and title belts and sanctioned things. It's got to be more unified under one governing body. There should be a World Boxing Association. There shouldn't be all these various BDO and blah blah blah, blah and WBF and all. There should be one sanctioned governing body. Simplify it. Force boxers, while they've still got their boxing license, to go regular drugs testing. It's so simple, but the sport doesn't want to do it. It's one of the most corrupt sports you'll find is boxing. It's one of the most deceitful, corrupt sports you'll find is professional boxing. The sports is a shambles. But the general. Well, yeah, it happens. The Link Centre is not a young building. It's over 30 years old. These things do happen. It has actually been really, really warm the last couple of days, but we've also had this really heavy rain, strong winds. Anything could have affected it. But hopefully it's resolved, and hopefully your game can go ahead, and hopefully all is well. We've had issues like this, in Bracknell's ice rink as well, where generators have failed. It does happen. It normally happens when the weather is warm like this. But we'll see what happens at 3 o'clock, and hopefully your game can go ahead. Frank Warren, yeah, no, Frank Warren, as a promoter, he will be frustrated because he's promoted this guy. He's part of his promotion stable. He's promoted this fight. He's really pushed to get this guy. After the social media incident where it was pretty obscene stuff. Offering to pay a woman to punch a guy in the head and then offer a sex act as well. That was pretty disgusting. But boxing doesn't seem to want to confront these issues with boxers doing stupid things. It never has. Boxers can go to prison for some very serious crimes, come back out, and they're welcome back into the sport, no questions asked. It's a sport that does have issues, and there is no unified governing body. You've got you've got the WBO, World Boxing Organisation. You've got the WBA. You've got the BDA, or whatever it is. The British Boxing. There's so many different. I think it's 5 different boxing organisations that sanction fights. They need to simplify it. They really need to simplify it. The whole thing is shambolic, and I'm not going to lie on that. It is a shambles. It's a disgrace. And Billy Joe Saunders is a disgrace. I mean, Tyson Fury. He's not my favourite cup of tea, but he did willingly admit, yeah, I've taken drugs, and yes, I've got mental health issues, and he fully admitted that. Fair play to him. He's an arsehole, but fair play to him. But then you've got to look at boxers like Mike Tyson, and then it's how they're promoted as well. It's who's around them. Boxing does have an issue. I don't have a webcam for my Xbox. It's annoying, but I don't have a webcam for my Xbox, and I do have a few technical issues at the moment with my internet and tech failing me. My iPad's failed me today. My laptop's failed me this week. My wallet's been stolen. I've had a really stressful week, and it hasn't been great. So I'm trying to sort out tax return. Everything is all going wrong at the same time. So one less tech thing, the better. I could do it on my Xbox, but I don't want to, really. I just don't want to. I don't see the need to. I mean, I might get an Xbox One X after Christmas when they're a bit cheaper in a sale, and get a webcam with it. I might do that, but at the moment I don't need to upgrade my Xbox. I mean, I'm happy with. Well, I was happy with the setup I had, but if it wasn't a live stream, I would have probably had a shorter video, because my phone just does not have the memory to have more than, I think, a 3-minute video. When the laptop does get fixed, we can do some more. We'll get the whiteboard out, and we can discuss a variety of things. We can discuss all sorts. We can have history videos again. We can get more information on the board. We can really discuss in-depth things. But at the moment, it's just a technical nightmare. Everything's wrong at the same time. It's exceptionally frustrating, and having to basically buy a new driving license. I've had to pay to have a replacement driving license. I've got to wait up to 2 weeks for that to get sent out, and that's frustrating. And it's annoying. My wallet's been stolen, but it's part of life. The first, I've obviously dropped my wallet. I've gone into the store to say, look, I've dropped my wallet here, and they've claimed they haven't got it when I know they have, and it's annoying. What is going on with Ryan Hall? I don't. Has he left the Leeds Rhinos? Has he retired? Is he injured? I mean, Ryan Hall is an exceptional winger. But it's interesting to see if he was to go to the NRL, for example, how he would fare in the NRL. He's big, he's powerful. Defensively, he has been exposed at times, and I have noticed this about his defence. He does sort of go wandering in defence. In attack, he's great under the high ball when you're kicking cross court, kick to the corner. He's good going forward. He can take hit ups at the middle. in defence, he's a little bit open to being pulled around a little bit and losing position. But I wouldn't be surprised if the NRL be eyeing up Ryan Hall because you've got to look at his strike rate. You have to look at Ryan Hall's strike rate in the Super League. And the Super League I would put as the secondary. I think the NRL is better than the Super League, but to play professional rugby league and have that strike rate says something about the quality of the player that I think he's too good for Super League. Far too good for Super League. Whether he goes cross-code into rugby union and they try and put him as an outside centre, for example, that would possibly be an option because he's that kind of big physical lump. But I think his tackling technique and his defence technique sometimes worries me about him in defence because every time I've seen him play in the Challenge Cup on the TV, he just looks. I worry about him in defence. If as a neutral, you watch your game and it's entertaining, but when you are watching the Rugby League World Cup like it was last year, Ryan Hall really had me worried about defensively. Would he be a defensive liability? And then and the commentators and the pundits never singled him out, but he did look really at sea defensively at times, positionally. I think that is the weakness in his game, is defensively. It's just his positioning, and then he's out of position. He tries to make a tackle, he's out of position, and he's made to look flat-footed. But if he does leave, that is a big blow for Leeds Rhinos. I think again they're losing that leadership call, and the team is weaker now than what it was 2-3 years ago, and they haven't replaced those leaders. They haven't replaced those leaders. And when you've got players like Ryan Hall, you can come off the wing and hit up the middle and take the pressure off that forward base. If you lose a player like that, yeah, that's going to have an effect. He's a leader in that dressing room. He's one of the most experienced players on the team. He's been with the team his entire career. You lose Ryan Hall, you're losing a lot. But defensively, I think is his weakness. It's more of his positional defensive side. I think, yeah, he can put a big hit in, but defensively, positioning is what I think lets him down. Physically, he's got the physicality. It's his defensive positioning lets him down, and that's where I think he needs to work on his game. If he does leave, I don't know where he goes, but I wouldn't be surprised if the NRL would be going. We'll give an NRL team going. Yeah, we could give this guy a chance. BT Sport is a shambles of a TV company. David Hay just doesn't have the commentary voice. David Hay is really got an annoying voice. I don't know if his voice would suit commentary, but it's boxing, so you watch people get bludgeoned in the head for 3-minute rounds and give each other brain damage. So you don't have to be the most intelligent person to listen to boxing because you can't. There's not. What can you do in during a boxing fight during a round? You can. Leon Price, he's getting on a bit now. Leon Price as a rugby league player, he's still a decent player. He's a solid player. He's been around for a long time. Stalwart of the game, but I don't know how many more years he's got left in him. But again, we'll have to see with where rugby league's at, the quality level. Jermaine McGilvery signing on for Huddersfield was a big thing. I thought he may end up in the NRL, and I think the NRL would still be looking at Jermaine McGilvery and going, a club will give him a shout. I can see Ryan Hall and Jermaine McGilvery being looked at by some NRL clubs at some point in the next year or so, and going, we'll give these guys a go, because Jermaine McGilvery was the best player for England during that World Cup last year, and that was not a good performance, I don't think. So interesting. Nothing can be as inanely annoying as Chris Eubank, possibly Phil Neville as a shocking commentator, but Chris Eubank is, no, it's annoying. It's like blood running from your ears. But at the same time, I'm surprised BT Sport have signed up David Hay. BT Sport are getting desperate. If they're losing all these subscribers to their channel and they're losing all these TV rights, I don't know how much longer BT Sport can keep going. And how much would David Hay require as salary as well to appear? Because it's David Hay. I'm not a big fan of David Hay though. David Hay is one of those characters who divides opinion. He's a divisive character. Not everyone is a David Hay fan. He's got his detractors, but you're going to get that with any individualistic sport like tennis, like boxing, like MMA, like any sport where it's the individual rather than the team. You're going to have characters like this, bigger egos. In a team, in a dressing room, when you've got a team sport, you're going to have those egos, those divisive characters like a Zach Hardacre, but there is a team of players. Individualistic sports, such as boxing, they're amplified, and he has not always. He's done a lot of talk the talk, and sometimes he's failed to walk the walk. This trash talking, this trash talking makes the sport seem cheap, and boxing's very good at the trash talk, and it does, I think make the sport come across as cheap and less professional than it could be. But boxing's got a lot of issues, and MMA is going the same way. And it's interesting because the Conor McGregor Habib feud and what's happened at UFC over the last 8 months has given me a lot of video ideas and a lot of it does provide video material and discussion material. The thing is, I'm not a big fan of UFC, and this is one of the reasons why is how it's been run. Massive expansion up until 2016, and I occasionally watch the occasional UFC fight, and I did buy UFC 2 on Xbox One from EA Sports. Didn't really get into the game as much as I would have liked, but yes, it has got the press coverage, and it has got the interest from the casual. But a lot of people will probably be like looking at it going, really? It can be off-putting for sponsors. It can be off-putting for investors. If there's constant legal issues within an organisation or within a sporting league, it can go, do we want to invest? Do we want to sponsor? Do we want to sign up a TV deal if there's going to be constant legal negativity and public negativity? I do fear that UFC is going to become more of the pre-match circus than the actual quality inside the 8-sided ring, octagon, whatever you want to call it. There are massive problems with UFC and Bellator. Bellator is not getting the coverage it deserves because it doesn't seem to have these incidents, whereas UFC seems to be stealing the headlines of the sport as promotion because it has all this negativity and all this nasty stuff. But Bellator doesn't seem to have this, pre-match circus. Then I think the quality in Bellator is probably higher. What I would like to see is a unification belt between the weight division champions of Bellator and the weight division champions of UFC, and that might actually help the sport. But that's another thing entirely, and Bellator has legal ramifications with Conor McGregor. They're suing Conor McGregor for a similar incident that happened at a Bellator event in Dublin. So Bellator are coming out and saying, well, Bellator are basically suing UFC fighter and Conor McGregor, so they're basically suing UFC via proxy. But it'd be interesting to see what happens. But individualistic sports, snooker's another one. Pool, darts, you are going to get individual characters. It is interesting, how those characters can help or hinder a sport. David Hay is a controversial character. There's a variety. I don't have Rugby League 4 live, no, I don't. And at the moment, I'm not in a position to buy anymore. At the moment, I'm not in a position to really buy stuff at the moment. I've got to wait for bank stuff to come through and ID stuff to come through and get the laptop repaired or replaced, and that's going to be expensive, and so that's got to come first. I might pick it up, I might give it a whirl, but at the moment it's not on my radar of things to buy. I don't really buy sports games for the console, but I'm willing to give it a go. What was that last comment? Bellator is I know Dana White obviously wants Bellator to fail, but at the same time, competition actually makes things better. If you've got a competitor, it makes things better. Look at WWE when they were the only major mainstream professional wrestling promotion. Impact Wrestling comes along with TNA, and it pushed them for a while, and then TNA struggled, and you know, and if UFC and Dana White want to kill off Bellator, they're going the wrong way about it, because Bellator, yes, they are going under the radar, but they're not having these controversial incidents. And if you are an investor and you want to go sign up a TV deal or invest or sponsor, you're going to look at controversy all the time. No controversy. So long term, I think Bellator might have a good game plan of watching UFC destroy itself internally. But we'll see what happens. I mean, UFC obviously has grown far quicker than Bellator and in a stronger financial position. But with what's happened at UFC 229 and now the Nevada State Athletic Commission temporarily suspending two of the fighters, we'll see what happens. I think Bellator, the owners of Bellator, we sat there watching UFC make such a ham-fisted attempt of being the top promotion, and really making a ham-fisted attempt of this whole situation. And they'll probably be rubbing their hands together going, we might be able to sign up some fighters that are actually unhappy with the way that UFC has treated them, or is dealing with the situation, or dealt with issues. They might snap up some fighters who might go, we don't want to be part of this promotion anymore. I've not actually been to a rugby league game as such, but I've been watching rugby league on the TV since I was 3 years old. I've played it, but I've never actually watched a professional rugby league game, which I would like to do. But the nearest team is the London Scholars or London Broncos, and I might decide to go down to the game next season in the Super League. I might give it a go, going to London Broncos, because now the quality level will be that much higher than what it was this season in the Championship. Obviously, I'm assuming the Broncos will get battered, but I'm more likely now to go to a rugby league game because the Broncos have got into the Super League, and the Scholars, I think, are solid in the league they're in as well. But again, the Super League needs to grow in England. It needs to grow in the south of England, and especially in non-traditional areas in England, because otherwise it risks being the secondary promotion and the secondary league, to the NRL by a long way. It is what it is. They do run the risk of being left behind by NRL. I've got to be careful with vlogging and doing things live at games, because copyright and things like that. And I can definitely do a match review on what I've seen, and I will probably be following the London Broncos season. I might get a season ticket. I don't know. It all depends on where I am financially and where things are next year. But I need something to keep me occupied in the summer when the ice hockey and the rugby union isn't on the TV and on accessible. I do need something to keep me occupied when the NHL isn't on, and British ice hockey's off season. So rugby league could be a way I could go to catch a couple of games next year. It would be nice. It would be a difference. It would be a change. Hopefully the London Broncos can make a good attempt at staying in the Super League and give it a good run. I think rugby league and the Super League needs it in this country, that there is a successful team in the south of England, and if the London Scholars can improve as well and work their way up, then I think that again will be beneficial long term. But then rugby league needs to look at why it is where it is financially, and is where it is in market share of sports in the UK, and is where it is in the quality level compared to the NRL being better. They need to assess why they are second best right now. It wasn't always the case that Great Britain or England were second best Australia when it came to rugby league. Rugby league in Australia came across its own crossroads about 20 years ago in the Super League wars, and that's when British rugby league was better. It swings and roundabouts. The NRL's got stronger, and Super League has stagnated, and there are issues with a variety of things. But it is what it is, and the Super League does need to look at where it's at. I think that's that you've had to pay more on pay-per-views than a Sky Sports subscription. This is where the model of is flawed. If this is where subscription TV is flawed. This is where pay-per-views is a dying, flawed model. It's a short-term cash grab, but the way that the pay-per-view prices are going up and up and up, I think, it is putting a lot of sports fans off. But anyway, I'm gonna end the live stream there. I'll just answer the last comment. Doing this on my phone has actually not been that bad. The picture quality is better. I've heard no complaints of connectivity, so maybe live streams will be done on the phone from henceforth. I do obviously miss having the laptop. The iPad, I might have slightly broken it in my rage as well. I might have bent it. I might have put a big dent in my iPad, so I don't think my iPad's going to be alive much longer somehow. But no, I do want my laptop back. I need my laptop back. My iPad is so old that it just cannot cope connectivity-wise in streaming. I do hope, obviously, the Swindon game can go ahead, but if it's the compressor, that's the air compressor, that's curtains for the night. I think that's dead dodo. If it was the generator, you can always get a generator in, but I hope you do get to watch your Swindon Wildcats game. I've just got to wait 5 working days for my bank card to arrive, which should arrive sometime next week, either Thursday or Friday, and I've got to wait up to 2 weeks for my driving licence to come back. So yeah, it's frustrating. I'm going to see if my mate's granddad can fix my laptop, and that could save me a bundle. But it does mean the webcam isn't as good, and I really I'm not getting my wallet's gone. My wallet is gone. I mean, all they've got is a bank card that's now been cancelled, a driving licence that's been replaced, a condom, some receipts, and I've got to cancel my membership card from Infinity as well. But yeah, they've only got they've got my national insurance number, which is a problem. But the police station wasn't open, so that's great. I go to my local police station, it's shut. So that is an absolute pain in the arse. But it is what it is. It's gone. I've reported. I've had to report things as missing. I've reported my bank card as stolen, so that's now been logged, and that should trigger something. But I've reported my driving licence is lost just to avoid all the hassle on the DVLA website, because that would require a crime reference number, and I don't have one. So I thought, sod it, I'll just go say it's lost, because it could turn up in here. It could, I don't want to report everything as stolen if it is in my house. I do believe it's in my house, but at the same time, we can't find it, which means it's probably been dropped, but I can't find it on the road, and it's just a pain in the arse, so it's gone. It's stressful, it's annoying, it's frustrating, but we are where we are, so we have to go from here. God knows where it's gone, it's just thin air. But I'm going to leave that there. It's been an interesting live stream. We finally got it to work. We might do live streams off the phone in for future, which would be kind of nice, because the picture quality is better. And for some reason the connectivity is better. I think my data has just been swallowed up, but the picture quality of my phone is pretty good. The sound quality, I'm hoping, is pretty good. There's been no complaints about sound quality, which is nice. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, guys. I do apologise for all the live issues we had earlier, and the technical. It's just everything's been a bit up in the air this week, not going right. Tried the best. The iPad just didn't want to cooperate. It just didn't have the up-to-date patches on it. It just didn't want to work. So we had to go on the phone, which I would rather we didn't, but it is what it is. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, guys. Cheers for all your comments and questions. We've discussed a lot about boxing and UFC, which is not normally a thing that happens a lot on the channel, but it's nice to have some new sports talked about and some new athletes talked about. And I'll have some more videos for you guys soon. Thank you very much, and I hope everyone who's at matches today enjoys their matches, and I hope the Swindon game goes ahead. But you'll obviously find out at 3 o'clock. Thank you, everyone, and I'll have some more videos for you soon.